I'm here with my buddy Chelsea. Chelsea is a rescue dog, and she's only been in the house for about a week. One of the issues that our guardian wanted to work with is this stuff, loose leash handling. Now, a lot of us don't realize that when we're walking our dogs have something called an opposition reflex. That means they are programmed to resist pressure. Now you see that she is kind of biting at the leash. That's an indication that a dog is frustrated with the experience. I don't want you yanking me around. Now, it's not these guardians because she's only been in this house for a week. You see, I didn't pull and all that, but as soon as she felt the pulling pressure, she turned around to bite it. So what we're going to do is I want to teach her that the pressure means that you should come back to your human. So we're going to do this with a pressure game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add very, very light pressure, and this is kind of almost against what I normally like to do because I like to be force and punishment free. But what dogs have an opposition reflex. So I pull, she's naturally resisting and she's learning to bite at the leash. So what I want to do is I want to wait for her to settle down. And I guess before we get to that, while she's doing this, I'm just going to I'm not going to engage with this, and I'll let her do her thing. If she does this a lot, you could use a chain leash, but I would prefer just to do it when your dog's in an amicable mood. Now, the more you pull your dog on a leash, the more your dog's going to pull back. And also, if you use a prong collar or any device that causes pain, it often causes the dog to become aggressive. It releases cortisol into their blood. It makes it walking an unpleasant experience. And the dog is, all these things are going to work against us instead of working for us. So I'm going to show her that I have a good treat here, and you see how that got her attention. So what I want to do is I just want to get her to, well, first of all, not be tangled up on the leash. And I just want her to understand not the jumping part, but that coming towards me. And I'm holding, you see how I'm holding those out? That was poor mechanics on my part. Now, if I'm holding this out, I'm creating that situation. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all back except for one or two, and then I'm going to keep my hand. I'm going to be mindful of my hands so that I don't have them out here. Let's get you not tangled up. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be mindful so they're not in her face. Wait for her to disengage. Her marker word is yes. Yes! So I'm going to add light pressure. Yes, I'm not pulling her. I'm adding pressure, and if she resists it, I keep the pressure light, or I would remove the pressure, keep it very, very light. So the idea for this is when I pull.
Luke, you're walking into the video.
And this is just for you, it's not a big deal, but a lot of people just don't want to be on the shot. So if you see, these are very, very high value treats, and you see the response we're getting from her. Earlier, she wasn't that as interested in the treats. So I might be using too high of a value treat, but for this video, I wanted to make sure we got a good response. So, all right. So what I'm going to do, and we'll get to some other tips at the end, is I pull a little, and if she's sitting down, I might just take a step. And that's what I want, is her to come to me, but not with that jumping, and that's just too excited. So what I do is, I add a little bit light. Yes. And I want her to come to me without the actual jumping. So now I'm going to pull again. Yes. Normally when she gets the end of that leash and she feels that pull, she is going to continue pulling against it, and then we take it personally, we pull back, and we get this tug of war. Yes. So now she's kind of coming with me. Yes. And you notice there, I didn't take the treat out of my pouch. I have my hand here. Probably I shouldn't even have my hand here. So my hand is empty. Yes, and then I reach for my pouch. Having one of these pouches is really helpful because that way you don't have all the treats in your hand. You saw how jumpy she was. So now what I could do is I can move around a little bit. Let's reach you that. Come here, right there. Your nose is very interesting for a dog. Yes. You got to chew your treats first before you start swallowing. There we go. So I'm using the marker word when she comes to me. Yes. So, and what we're doing this in the backyard. This environment is not full of distractions. If I try to do this technique on the street, she is going to pull like crazy or not pay attention to us. So as you're doing this, you're going to go through thresholds or stages going from an easier environment to a slightly more challenging. One of the guardians here has a medical issue that's going on that makes it difficult to walk the dogs, just doesn't have as much dexterity as normal. And so practicing a controlled environment, I can control my stimulus. If she does get away from me, I can drop the leash. She's not going to pull me down, and she's not going to get herself in trouble. So we want to practice in a low environment of low stimulus. So again, I'm not going to reach for the treats yet, although I just did. Sticky fingers. Yes. Yes. That was a lure, which I really prefer not to do, so I'm not gonna have a treat in my hand. Yes. So when she comes to me, then I say yes, then I reach for the treat, then I deliver the treat, and after a while, now we can walk a little bit. Yes. Yes. So again, I didn't add any pressure to the leash. Now this is a leash pressure game, so the idea for this at first, now if she does that, I'm just gonna, I treat a lot on walks when we're training them. Later on, eventually we'd like to have multiple steps. I'll go through that stage next. But right now, this is probably an indication she is either bored or frustrated, or might just be feeling rambunctious because she's done this a lot. So I use the positive interrupter to get her attention, have her for a sit. Yes. So I'm asking her to do something that I want her to do instead of responding to her biting the leash, because that makes it validating. And this is because a lot of us, when the dog pulls on a leash, we are pulling them away, and it creates frustration. They either jump up on us or grab the leash. So this is probably the penance that you're paying for your previous guardian. Now we can also, which side do you want her to walk on, your right side or your left side?
I want it on my left side.
On your left side. So I'm gonna show you an exercise, and this angle is perfect. The lighting's a little bit suspect, but that's okay. So if I want her on my left side, let's start on better camera presence. So what I'm gonna do is, since I want her on my left, I'm gonna hold my leash in my right hand. And if you're gonna watch, I'm gonna take my hand, my arm and my leg are gonna go back simultaneously. But that's not what we're looking for. So watch this. I turn her, and I'm delivering the treat with my hand behind the seam of my pants. This is why we call it the heel position. I'm not a fan of teaching dogs to heel. You can do it, but it's not very much fun, and most people walk their dog for exercise. A heel is not a great way to exercise your dog because the dog's not sniffing. Remember, dogs burn more energy on a walk by sniffing than they do from walking. So what I do, and I'll do two of them in a row. So I go like this. I'm sweeping my arm back and my leg. I turn her, and then I say yes when she gets in this position. Then I turn and face her again, and I'm gonna do the other side. Wait for her to finish chewing. Sweeping my arm and leg back, turn her towards you, and then when she's in the position, release that treat, and then you can turn and face her again. So this is just to condition her to go on one particular side of you, on your left side. So now what I can start doing is I can have my treat in this hand. I'm gonna have a bigger one here so she can smell it. Yes, and I can release that treat, and I put another one in there. Yes. So that was 2 steps. Now I'm doing this very, very quickly because this is a training video for you guys to watch later on. This would normally be, I would be at 1 step for quite a while before I'd go to 2 steps. So I'm gonna have the treat in my hand. 1, 2, yes, and I release it. Then I immediately go ahead and have another treat. Wait for it to done chewing. Yes. Now, at first we're having the treat in this hand to attract her attention, but eventually we don't want to do that. Eventually we want her to come to the other hand, or get the treat to come from the other hand. So I have a treat in both hands now. So I'm going to lure her into position first, and now I'm going to walk 1, 2, and then I'm going to, yes, and treat her from the other hand. I still have the treat in this hand. Walk 1, 2, yes. And eventually what you're going to do, I'm now going to have the treat only in my right hand. My hand looks like it did. Chelsea. 1, 2. Now, the reason she's not doing errors is I don't have the treat in my hand. Now, let me move to the shade so we don't have a weird coloring. So basically, when I do that, the reason I'm doing that, I'm, again, moving very fast in this video. What I want you to do is have the treat in this hand, one of those tricky trainer treats that has a smell, and she's walking, you're using that to keep her in the position. And you do that until, you take 1 step and release and put another one, 1 step, release. Do that maybe 1 or 2 different days for about 12 to 20 treats. Then what we start doing is maybe do 5 of them where we have the treat here as a warm up. Once she's already doing it, then I can go ahead and mimic like I have a treat here. My hand's probably still gonna smell like I have these treats because of this aroma. And then but now I'm treating from my other hand. And this is one of the other reasons why I went over hand targeting earlier. You can do hand targeting, and she can do it with a flat hand as well. So the idea is I don't want her to say that I have to see the treat in order to do the action. I'm gonna trust that my guardian is gonna hook me up with that treat at the appropriate time. So now there's a couple of other things that you can do, and this is a little bit of a different technique. So let's go ahead and show you this technique. Yes, would you like a treat? Come here, Chelsea. So what I'm gonna do, and let me go ahead, and you can stay there, I'm just gonna walk towards you. Yes, well, come on, sweetheart, there we go. So I have her in that lured position, and I give her that treat. And actually, this one would be better if I had a whole bunch of treats in my hand. 1, 2 steps. And then I release the treat. And eventually I work up to 3 steps, 4 steps. Eventually you're walking like 10 steps holding a treat here. Actually, not 10. When you get to about 5 steps, then I go like this. When I'm going to give her the treat, I'm going to go like this. Yes. Now again, this is very abridged. Let me move further away so we can show you again. Come here, Chelsea. But see how she's walking near my hand? There's not a lot of distractions. So eventually what I'm going to do is go like this, raise it here to my shoulder, 1, 2, 3. And see how she started jumping? She got excited because I pulled the treat away. So at first when you're doing this, as soon as you, after you get to 5 steps where you can take 5 steps with the treats in your hand here, and she's walking next to you, then you take your 5 steps and go like this. Let's say this is the 6th step. So you say yes right before you give it to her, but we're just raising our shoulder immediately and immediately going straight down. Chelsea, let me see if I can show you what it's going to look like. Chelsea, come here, sweetheart. Come on. But again, this whole time, I'm making sure there's no tension on that leash. And that's a really important thing, step that a lot of people miss. So eventually I'm going to go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, treat. Now you're going to work yourself up to walk. At first you're holding up here for 1. At first you're just going boom, boom. And then after you've done that a couple times, maybe 5 or 10 repetitions, then you maybe take a half step holding it up here, then a full step while you're holding up here. If you ever watch America's Got Talent to those games, and they're walking with the dog, and the dog's looking up at its handler, it's because the handler's holding the treat up here, and now they're getting up to 20 steps, 30 steps, and the dog's walking next to you, because when you pull it away, that means the treat is about to happen. I'm about to get the treat. I like that. It's a good positive thing. Now, something else, a couple things. Like I mentioned earlier, dogs burn more energy in a walk by sniffing than they do from walking. Let's say we're walking, and let's say that this house right here has a dog that barks, and it causes my dog to get really excited. Or actually something else. She likes to bark and chase after trucks. So one of the things we want to do is build in a find it cue. So find it. Her nose is not very good for a dog. She's about to find it here. Yes, I'm saying yes when she gets it, which is normally not the case. Find it. Find it. I'm wondering if she has a visual or some sniffing stuff. So this is why it's important we practice this in our environment. And I would, something else you can get, go get string cheese. Can she have cheese? Yeah. Get this thing of string cheese and slice it so that you have little nickel-shaped medallions. That white contrast on your grass is going to make it easier for her to see it. And so the idea is you say, find it, and throw it. And eventually she gets practice at, this is a game that we do. So let's say we're walking down the street and we see that there's a truck that's a moving truck that's going to be driving by us. Well, then maybe I cross the street and incorporate some distance. The best thing to do is always incorporate distance, anything your dog's reactive to. And I show her I have a treat, I throw it and say, find it. Well, we've practiced this a whole bunch in the backyard. Find it. Oh, you're going to throw treats on the ground and I get all the treats? This is my favorite game ever. What am I not doing? I'm not barking or working on the truck. Now, if when the truck comes by and it gets like maybe where that sprinkler head is, and she stops and she goes at it, that's her way of saying that is too proximate to me. So when that's the case, then you want to find maybe a neighbor or an area that has a little park where you can increase that distance. The idea is to be close enough to it where your dog is interested, but not so close that it feels like it needs to chase it. Once we find that Goldilocks distance, then we practice this leave it or the find it, different than leave it. And then maybe after we practice this at 20 feet, maybe then next time we practice at like 19 feet, 18 feet, 17 feet. The mistake we make as humans is we go from 20 feet to 0 feet. And that's just too big of a jump. So we gotta go in stages or thresholds or whatever the word you wanna use, but go at her pace. The whole goal is for us to eventually walk by a truck and she doesn't lunge at it because she's playing find it or she's more interested in you giving her the treats. That's rewarding and validating. Chasing the truck isn't, but she chases the truck and we're like, no, we're stopping, we're pulling. That is validating for her. Does that make sense? Now, if that continues, we might want to set up a follow-up session and work on counter conditioning, which is a different exercise. But for here, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of wrap this up here in a sec, and then the guardian's going to practice this with her here in this environment. And when you practice, some marching orders for this. Well, I guess, let's not pull the poop bags out. Yes. You just all, and this is again, frustration or boredom. So I can pull, I'm just holding it, sure that I have a treat. There you go. and probably teaching her I'll drop it or leave it would be helpful. I know these are more convenient. I'm not a big fan of these on the leash because I just find that they get in your way, and then dogs like her like to jump up and grab it. She's looking for anything to grab, so I'm just going to kind of put this away. All right, so a little exercise before the walk is a helpful thing to do. Exercising your dog, just make sure you get your dog about 10 minutes of rest before you go for the walk. Also try to pick and choose your battles. If you know that it's 3 o'clock and that's when all the deliveries come and she goes after trucks, don't walk her at that time. Try to walk her beforehand or afterwards. Let me see. There are a couple other fun exercises that you can do. I'm not going to go over them with her because she has such a difficult time finding the treats. Like some of them is we go something like this. Show her you have a treat. Call this the thunder. And I throw it underneath my legs, and she goes and gets it. But you're not cooperating. They say don't work with children or dogs in Hollywood. Okay, so it's right there. It's right there, silly. You are very, she's on a scent of something else. There we go. All right, so basically.
If I ignore it, then you'll pick it up here.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is I think the guardian here previously spoiled their other beloved dog that they lost, unfortunately, about 6 months ago. And so Chelsea is a different dog. She's a rescue dog, and she's only been here for a week. Dogs, you kind of start seeing more of the true personality as they get more settled in her home, which is, I think, what's starting to happen with her. So this is getting a little bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. But basically what I want you guys to do is practice like 3 or more times a day in your backyard for short successes. I'd rather have you practice for 1 minute successfully than go to 5 minutes where 4 minutes and 55 seconds were successful and the last 5 seconds were not, because she's going to remember the last repetition the brightest. So the last repetition should always be the best one. Now, eventually, at first you're going to practice just in your yard. Eventually, then, can you get out to the street from your yard this way or that way? So then what I'd like you to do is practice in your yard, and once she's doing pretty well, then you go, yeah, you found the poop bags, huh? She's like, I'm not cooperating with this. There we go. And then what I'd have you do is practice in your yard, and then basically I'll go ahead and drop it so you can go ahead and go where you want. And then I would practice this as you progress out of your yard, and then just practice in your front yard. Practice back and forth in front of your house. Don't go too far away. And something else that I like to do every once in a while to make sure the dog's not too aroused. Chelsea, sit. Yes. I periodically will stop and check to see if the dog's too aroused by asking for a sit or a down or a hand target, a very basic command that I know that they know. And if they can't do it, we're getting past the level of concentration the dog can offer us. The farther away we go from our house, the worse it's going to get. So don't use that as your test. If she won't sit, then turn around and start walking back towards your house. You're getting too far away. So the idea for this is practice about 3 times a day in your backyard, and eventually backyard walking into your front yard. Then eventually starting maybe 2 or 3 repetitions here, mostly in the front yard, and then a couple of on the street. And then you're going back and forth and gradually going further and further and further. Chelsea, Chelsea, come here, puppy, puppy. Yes. And use that luring technique, the exercise that I showed you. Let me break down all these exercises. So this one, do this with about 10 treats each time. So sweep your arm and leg back, turn her, and then give her the treat, then face her, grab another one, and repeat that exercise. And then you can take a step. You're gonna do it again. And let's do that again. Lure her, and then I got the treat. So if you see kind of the method of my madness in these exercises, one thing leads to the other. This one going back and forth in a heel position leads into us walking with the treat in our hand. Then we're walking with the treat, excuse me, my nose is running. Then we're taking 2 or 3 steps, and eventually we're doing the thing where we're pulling it back up here. Other times you're going to practice that leash pressure game where it's just going to be like this, light pressure, yes. And the instant she gives in the pressure, say yes. And eventually what you're going to do is you're just going to kind of, yes. I didn't even have to do the pressure. I just walked backwards. Then eventually I'm going to walk this direction. Yes. I'm running out of treats, aren't I? Yes. So see, I'm changing direction, and now I can walk this way. And we're getting Chelsea to walk in a nice loose leash, not a heel position, but kind of close to it. All right, Miss Chelsea, come here. Chelsea, sit. This is my buddy Chelsea, and these are some tips you can use if you're trying to get your dog to walk with a loose leash. You're a goofball. Yes, you are. Goofy.